My name is Colleen Lindgren, and I'm with the Pacific Legal Foundation.
You're right.
Thank you. So, chairs and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to join you today. As mentioned, I'm the state policy manager at Pacific Legal Foundation, and that means that I'm privileged to come to places like Arkansas and work with legislators like you around the country to apply constitutional solutions to policy problems. Pacific Legal Foundation is a nonprofit public interest law firm that has dedicated several decades to defending clients free of charge when their constitutional rights are violated. Since our doors opened in 1973, we've advocated for the right of all Americans to put their property to productive use for the betterment of themselves, their families, and their communities. Property rights are the cornerstone of liberty. The right to own, enjoy, and put property to productive use is a source of personal security, dignity, and prosperity that enables individuals to shape their destiny. The Fifth Amendment guarantees that Americans shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And the 14th Amendment reiterates this protection, adding, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall bridge the privileges of citizens of the United States. Yet, all too often, we see the promises of the 5th and 14th Amendments are tossed aside or outright attacked. Courts have largely ignored questions surrounding land use, and governments at every level have enacted laws and regulations that devalue property and trample individual rights. PLF has a long record of defending both property rights and the proper separation of powers, including 18 U.S. Supreme Court wins, and we're dedicated to holding the regulatory state accountable. Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the U.S. Constitution establish 3 separate branches of government which provide essential checks and balances to protect and promote individual rights. And state constitutions, like Arkansas's, follow suit. State constitutions also follow in addressing the rights of citizens, and Arkansas affirms these in its own Article 2, going so far as to say that the right of property is before and higher than any constitutional sanction. So with this as a foundation, there's a lot of room for Arkansas to build, figuratively and literally. Housing is top of mind across the country, and I focused the distributed materials and most of my remarks in this vein. But things like energy production and agriculture are close behind and deserve equal application of constitutional principles. So the good news is that there are principled and practical ways to approach all of these issues. Property rights are the foundation of innovation, sustainability, and opportunity. They're not merely legal entitlements, they're the framework through which people create value, steward resources, and pass opportunity to future generations. Yet in the name of things like environmental protection, property rights are often under siege. Landowners face ideological and often arbitrary barriers to putting their land to good use. And it seems to be fitting to discuss these issues here in the northwest corner of the natural state, a region that is known for as a rapidly growing base for business, and a state that's in the heart of America that is known for its beautiful and plentiful resources. Arkansans are industrious, from international trading to growing half of America's rice to leading in steel production. As state legislators, you're on the front lines of defending the right of your constituents to use property as a core environmental value. In the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's 2023 decision in Sackett versus EPA, where PLF's clients defeated federal agency overreach that prevented them from building a home on a property without water, but which the federal government had declared a wetland, overly regulated states, like your neighbor Tennessee, have started looking to their own laws to see what needs fixing. And on this particular issue, Arkansas is ahead of many states and does not regulate wetlands beyond what the federal government demands. This type of least restrictive mentality should be applied to all areas of regulation and is the solution to America's housing crisis. So in that vein, let's discuss several ways that you as legislators can come alongside localities to ensure property rights are protected and communities and individuals in Arkansas can thrive. The first approach is broad and twofold. The legislature should affirm that property rights must receive equal treatment with other rights in court. Judges cannot relegate them to less review or scrutiny, but this often happens. The legislature must require courts to apply the highest standard of review to government infringements on property rights, similar to other fundamental rights like free speech. The 5th and 14th Amendments are not lesser than the 1st or 2nd. And while this judicial backstop is important, it's equally crucial to proactively hold all levels of government in a state accountable when they restrict the use of property. This can be done by simply requiring governments to show their work, to have a compelling interest that justifies restrictions on the use of property. So that's things like protecting public health and safety or preventing genuine nuisance. A second set of reforms can set out to make housing truly affordable. The term affordable housing has been misappropriated for decades, most often referring to government-subsidized projects and placing arbitrary restrictions on building and development that don't really consider market needs or demands. So not only is this approach unprincipled and limiting, but it clearly isn't working. Homelessness continues to rise, and housing prices have increased almost 50% in the last decade. You can't make housing more affordable by making it more expensive to build, but this is what the historic response has been. And there are 4 key things that state legislators can do to create accountability, efficiency, and predictability in permitting. First, you can enact reforms that block third-party objectors from suing to stop approved projects. So unless the challenger can demonstrate a real harm, they can't impede an approved project. Too often we see localities' efforts to increase the supply of housing stymied by lengthy and frivolous legal battles that may not be successful in court, but are successful at least in stopping development because it becomes too costly to wait. So not only is it costly in the moment, but it's also a potential cost that individuals or businesses must weigh before even applying for a project. So states should ensure this is not the case. And a similar reform addresses something called zoning protest, ensuring that these protests don't impede, again, approved zoning regulations that expand the use of private property. So where citizens have had the chance to engage in the democratic approval process, unharmed objectors should not get a second bite at the apple, and state laws should ensure this minority tyranny is prevented. As we've already mentioned, unpredictability is a deterrent to development, and states should ensure that permitting processes are not only timely, but fair. Implementing timelines allows local governments to have processes unique to their needs, but ensures that citizens have a predictable approval process. The state should also ensure that all permit applications that meet zoning codes and related requirements are automatically approved. All too often, projects are treated differently due to the preferences of those reviewing them, and not only is this unequal treatment unconstitutional, but it's counterproductive and not time effective. When the government creates a scheme, the least it must do is apply it fairly. And lastly, I want to touch on something called housing exactions, which is a term that you've probably heard, but maybe not known how to address. So last year, PLF won a legal challenge at the US Supreme Court that addressed unconstitutional exactions, which are a quiet but mighty culprit in making housing much more expensive than it ought to be. In this case, Sheets v. County of El Dorado, the Supreme Court said that the government can only impose requirements and conditions on development, like impact fees, where there's a proportionate nexus to the impact. So states should require that government shows its work when issuing those fees and ensure that property owners have a right to challenge them in court if that process is abused. And states should also do away with housing exactions that are very common that require the applicant to offset the cost of deed-restricted housing elsewhere in order to receive a permit. Not only is this a violation of a property owner's right, deed-restricted housing actually harms the residents it's supposed to help by capping the potential of their property. So in the interest of time, I'm going to end here. However, I'm happy to take any questions or chat with anyone offline. The materials distributed today show model language, reference states that have recently implemented reforms, and also contain some research. And I'm happy to answer any questions or follow up later. Thank you for your time.
Any members have any questions? Representative Cook?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate your presentation, appreciate the work that you're doing. I was going through some of these recent reforms, and I saw that you had 2025 Kansas passed the Fast Track Permit Act, but we also passed a Fast Track Permit Act in 2023 by Representative Underwood. And so I was just curious, I mean, is that similar to what you guys are proposing, or is it different? Did we need to improve it? Did Representative Underwood not do a good job? I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to understand.
No.
Do I need to go in and fix his issues?
No, and these are just kind of general things to be on the lookout for, and I'm really glad to hear that Arkansas has already looked at that. And this is not a referendum on that bill. This is just a compilation of what has recently been done in states. And 2023 was before my time working in Arkansas, so I'm glad to know that, and appreciate that you're already paying attention to that issue.
Representative Wright, your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing up the affordability aspect on housing costs, because that is a key metric to the affordability crisis that so many people across the state and the country are facing. My question is specifically, is there any sort of rankings that your organization or similar organizations do that would show us, you know, how we compare to other states across the country in terms of overly burdensome land use regulations? And I know you've got a lot of legislation here that other states have done, but the second part of my question is are there any particular is there any particular state or states that you would say are sort of leading the way in this area?
Well, honestly, not just because I'm here in Arkansas, but I will say I think Arkansas is on a really good path right now. There were some really great bills introduced last year that made some progress, including one that addressed the issues I discussed here about raising the level of scrutiny in court and holding all levels of government accountable for restrictions on property. And Arkansas also passed a squatters reform last year, and there have been a lot of good conversations, and I think looking at some of the things that have been introduced in the last 2 sessions, there's some really great progress being made, and that's on par with what Montana has been doing. Montana, if you've paid any attention to the news in the last few years on housing, implemented 8 reforms 2 sessions ago, and then implemented a handful more in this past session. And they're really trying to get at the heart of these issues and figure out how to work with, you know, the various needs across the state, but also ensure that every constituent has these opportunities to have a home and be successful, take care of their families. And so Montana's a state that I would look to. We're actually in litigation there defending some of their laws right now that were challenged by individuals that don't want other people to have access to housing in their areas. And so that's definitely a state that I would take a look at. And to your first question, as far as research, one good source that I'm aware of is the National Association of Realtors. They frequently do studies on this, but we also are currently conducting some of our own internal research. At PLF, we have a strategic research team, and we're looking into trying to do some surveys, like you mentioned. And if there are ever specific things that you're looking at in Arkansas, we're also happy to kind of take requests and see if we can help out with that.
Thank you. And the last thing I was going to ask you is, it looks like a lot of these pieces of legislation that other states have passed, it looks like these are hyperlinks. Could you send us a digital version of this that we could look at the actual legislation? Thank you.
All right, any other questions from President Brown?
Thank you so much for being here. Am I on? Hello. Thank you for being here today. I just did a quick Google to find out what deed restrictions are. And so I recognize some of these. They're very prevalent out in California, pallets and what have you. And I know some of these are, or we do these around here somewhere. But I have one question. What is a home run business restriction? Oh, home run, like a business in your home. Okay, about home run. Adjacent structures, what might that be? If you're familiar with it.
For in the context of deed restrictions?
Yes, I just did deed restrictions, and I came up with a page that has 10 common deed restrictions you should know, and one of them they listed was adjacent structures.
So that, from my understanding, is a little bit less common. So that the types of deed restrictions that we mostly see in that our models, but also most of what our work on the litigation side has dealt with are restrictions on properties where it's usually something like a government subsidized property that where the sale or rental price is limited or something like that. So you're asking individuals who are seeking a permit for a separate project to subsidize that, and then you're also anyone who gets into that housing is limited with what they can do with it. So that's the most common type of deed restriction that we see. And I will note that where we work on this issue, any sort of private agreements, like say an HOA, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about really what government will be imposing on individuals. So the adjacent structures, I'm less familiar with that, and I haven't seen that come up a lot of places. But I'd be happy to look into it and get back to you.
Thank you, and that wasn't intended to be a gotcha question. Thank you for being here.
Any other questions? Public comment? Yeah,
I'd just like to say thank you for coming, thank you for being here, thank you for the work that you do. I think it's past time that we start treating property rights as they are, just as they are as important as all our other rights, the right to life, the right to freedom of press, freedom of religion, Second Amendment, all the others. So how we kind of left off property rights, let them get behind. So I think it's high time we start looking at them like they're just as important as others. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Representative Gonzalez. Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Lindbergh.
Thank
for
you.
your testimony. Now we have Chris with the Association of Arkansas County, Chris Line. Chris, you come, identify yourself, you know the procedure.
I've learned after having been here a while that the microphones, just so y'all know, sometimes take just a second to pick up in this room. So when you get it, you might want to watch for the green light. But thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Chris Valines with the Association of Arkansas Counties, and really, we so much appreciate you guys coming to our conference. This is our annual conference. We've got over 900 people in attendance here, and that includes 9 elected officials from counties across the state. So your judges, sheriffs, county clerks, circuit clerks, collectors, coroners, treasurers, JPs, and I'm probably missing 1 or 2, but I love all you guys back there. But they're all here in attendance, so there's a very good chance over the next few days, if you're here and you're wandering the halls, you're going to see some people from back home that get a lot out of our conference. We also enjoy a long-standing tradition with city, county, local of inviting you to come and have a meeting at the conference, and we want to thank you guys for being here today. As evidenced by the number of people in this room, we've had a long-standing great relationship with our state government in this state, and enjoy that to this day. In fact, Speaker of the House Brian Evans helped open our conference earlier and talked about that partnership and our work together and the history of that. So I'm not here to talk about the issues that are on the table. I'm looking forward to hearing about them just like you guys. So I'm going to say welcome to the conference and turn the microphone over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valines. Next up on the agenda, we have Lindsay Wallace, Secretary of the Department of Corrections. Can we only got 3 chairs, can we bring, yeah, let's go ahead and Dexter, if you want to come on up. Benny, if you want to come on up, and Mr. Watson too. Anyone else here from the Department of Corrections?
I think that's good. I think that's good.
All right, if each one of you would, whoever's going to speak first, just tell us your name, who you're with, for the record.
Do you want us to go down the line and then circle back?
Makes me no difference.
Okay. Lindsay Wallace, Secretary, Arkansas Department of Corrections. I'll go this way first.
My name is Wendy Ware. I'm a Senior Vice President with CGL Justice Division.
Benny Magnus, Chair of the Arkansas Board of Corrections.
Dexter Payne, I'm the Director for the Division of Correction.
I'm Grant Hodges. Grant Hodges, good to meet you, member of the Board of Corrections.
Lee Watson, member of the Board of Corrections.
All right, Lindsay, Lindsay, if you want to start us off.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate y'all's time tonight and the opportunity to speak with y'all. I want to be brief because in the interest of time, I know you have a long agenda, and I think Ms. Ware's projections will be very demonstrative for you on where we are in terms of where we need to go with prison beds. But I wanted to kind of recap what we've done since Governor Sanders has come into office. Since she came into office in 2023, we've brought over 1,400 beds online, mostly within the Division of Correction. That includes the opening of the White River Correctional Facility, Phillips County Detention Center in West Helena, and then we've added a few additional beds, but I don't have the number in front of me for community correction centers. The next month, we are going to bring on a women's health unit with an additional 50 beds, and then the Board of Corrections approved an expansion at the Mississippi County Work Release Facility, which will net us 100 additional beds. But it's very early stages of that. Our facilities, and I'll let Director Payne and anybody else at the panel kind of speak more about this, but they're consistently running over 100% capacity. We have just under 30 facilities, 6 work release facilities, 14 traditional prisons, and 7 community corrections centers. Our total jurisdictional count is just north of 21,000 offenders in our custody. That includes county jail backup, which is around 2,000, just north of 2,000, I think, today. So the pay plan has really helped. I know we've talked about staffing numbers in the past with vacancies. Our academies have been very full of late, and our vacancy rates are better than they've been in years. So we've seen the right trajectory with that. We've explored a lot of avenues that are available to address the backlog. We've examined procedures internally. We've looked at how we intake our inmates into facilities. One thing that we've done to try to expedite bringing folks in from county jails is with our community correction centers. We used to have a little bit of a log jam with those because they would get scheduled out to different facilities in the state. So it caused a little bit of a delay in getting them brought in. So what we've done is centralize that intake, which is right next to Ouachita River. So if a county's got some folks that need to go to a community correction center as well as a traditional prison bed, then they can drop them off on their way to Ouachita when they're bringing other folks. Something else that the parole board has been doing is looking at their procedures to see if there's any way that they can expedite any releases. They have been they've been utilizing it's a several years old law that's been on the books that actually authorizes them for certain offenders when they get to their transfer eligibility date, they can actually be released from county jails. So we're looking internally at all of the things that we could do to ease whatever the capacity issues are with the county jails, and we're very appreciative of the partnerships that we've created with the county sheriffs and with the counties themselves. I think we've been very fortunate, and I think the board will agree with that, to have a few really nice facilities that we've been able to utilize to create some relief for the counties. But I think Ms. Ware's presentation will be pretty demonstrative that we've sort of reached what our tipping point is within the department. I wanted to pivot to Director Payne to see if he has anything additional to add. You're good? Okay, well then I would really like to, I'm sorry, yes sir.
I have a question.
Yes sir.
The 21,000 that you mentioned, how many of those are non-violent offenses? And how many of those are federal prisoners that we're holding for feds?
I don't think we've got, I don't know that we have any that are just, we're holding for the federal government.
There are jails, there are county jails holding federal prisoners right now.
But I think
That's not under our
that's not
jurisdiction.
Right. Do you want that, Mr. Magnus? Go ahead.
Senator Stubblefield, committee, the federal prisoners that are detained in the county jails are not under our jurisdiction.
I understand that, but some of these county jails are holding them so they can earn extra money for their jails, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how many non-violent offenders do we have out of the 21,000?
I don't have that.
I don't have that breakdown.
I just got it the other day for a legislator. Did you ask for it? Somebody asked for it, and I got it. I had to find it on my phone. I'm trying to remember.
I don't have that number.
It's about right at 50%.
So half?
Half is nonviolent, but y'all have to be very, I never like to say something that might mislead a committee or the legislature. So I wish in a few minutes I'll try to find exactly. I got the I had a legislator call me the other day and want the numbers, and we got it. And I just don't remember what it was now, but it's gonna be close to, say, 55, 45, something like that.
So we've got almost 10,000 nonviolent offenders, county jails and prisons. Would that be correct?
It's my memory. I'm gonna keep looking here.
Can you give me just a brief list of the most common nonviolent offenses, Dexter?
Yes, sir. That probably would be theft of property.
Theft of property? What percentage of theft of property is? 30%? People stealing something?
Yes, sir. The non-violent crimes, theft of property, probably close to 25%.
Okay.
Those are the biggest.
Sheriff Montgomery might be in the audience. I got that information from him, for him. It wasn't the legislator, it was him. And I'm trying to find that text, but he might find it quicker than I do, because I did send that to him.
I have something I want to read to you. It says, we need to quit locking up all the people that we are mad at and lock up the people that truly deserve it. Throwing them in prison with a long sentence is a costly, short-sighted, irresponsible response. When we instituted these reforms in Arkansas, we witnessed a significant drop in our recidivism rate. As an added benefit, drug court rehabilitation models, such as community-based corrections, cost to the state significantly less than incarceration. Over time, these reforms save taxpayers millions, while also allowing and empowering offenders with the opportunity to regain, restore, and rebuild their lives. You know who said that? You know who wrote that? Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor Huckabee wrote that during his time as governor. Do you think he was correct? Do you think those words are accurate? Dexter?
Yes, sir. They're pretty accurate to me.
Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
You think they line up with what we're doing today? Since we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, and one of the highest recidivism rates. Still agree that these words line up with what we're trying to do today.
Senator Stubblefield, I think we're making steps to try to improve the recidivism rate. I think there have been a lot of changes over the years with varying degrees of success, and I think that's what Ms. Ware's projections and her presentation will kind of explain how the population has changed. I will tell you, sir, we're working on programming to try to improve our recidivism rate. We're doing kind of a top to bottom analysis of operations across the board in Department of Corrections. The board is supportive of it, the governor's supportive of it. You all have been tremendously supportive of progress that we have made and are making and goals that we want. So I think we're in the process of looking at everything that we have program related, how we're doing business, how we're operating, to try to improve some of the outcomes for the offenders that are in our custody.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Bray.
Yes.
I guess I'll try to ask Senator Stubblefield's question a different way. What percentage of inmates in state prison at this time are felony offenders?
100%.
All of them.
Okay, that's what I thought the answer was going to be. And the reason I asked the question that I knew the answer to was because a lot of times when people talk about nonviolent offenses, they say that to minimize the crime that was committed. There's a lot of people that would consider possession of child abuse sexual material to be nonviolent, but that's a very serious crime. If you have your car stolen out of your driveway, that's a very serious crime. So I just want to make sure that we're not minimizing the significance of some of these crimes, even though, you know, some might classify them just as nonviolent in nature. That's all I have. Thank you.
I purposely didn't answer the question a while ago because there's parts of what is said about quit locking up people we're mad at and only the ones we're afraid of. But when you have people in law enforcement that continue to arrest to somebody that maybe never do a violent crime, but they continue to prey on the public, prey on citizens of that district, we have to have a place to put them, because county jails sometimes cannot recidivate, and they can only hold them up for a year. So we have to have bed space to be able to hold those that just won't adhere to the laws of Arkansas and continue to violate. There'll be sheriffs that can testify. They got people that's in their facilities 16 times, 18 times. And when they finally cross that line to committing a felony, we have to have a place for them, even though it might be their first, per se, nonviolent crime. We just have to, as a society. And so I know for me, and I know a lot of people, you steal my car and you wreck it, it costs me $30,000, I'm gonna be real mad at you, you're right. But I also want you to be held accountable.
Representative Brown, you have a question?
Thank you all for being here, and I just want to harken back to our legislative council meeting on the 11th, where we learned a lot about these reentry facilities, and I know that you all are supposed to be providing legislative council with lots of reports with regard to that discussion. However, I was very impressed with what I learned at the reentry facility that I toured, and I would like to see if we can't use them more effectively, because they will cost the taxpayers a lot less money if we can. They will help rehabilitate people and put them out back into society with the tools they need to be successful: driver's license, resume, probably a job already, and a vehicle. And not only is that that's a good thing to do, but we don't need all this recidivism, and they have a much better recidivism rate or record with their facilities. I really want to encourage you all to look and see what we can do to take better advantage of these facilities, because several have closed down simply because they weren't receiving enough inmates. And the one that we toured it has 20 available beds. So I would like to see these used more effectively. Thank you. That wasn't a question, it was a statement.
Okay, thank you, Representative Brown. Just one question to each of you, and Senator King, would you agree, all of you, that one of the main reasons we have had such a large number of people that have had to be put in prison is because of the breakdown of the family and the breakdown of homes all over the state, where there's no dads at home, sometimes there's no moms at home, sometimes they're drug addicts, these kids many times, and I read the other day where Alabama and a lot of other states base their prison, whether they're going to build one, 15 years in advance, based on on third grade reading score. So if a child can't read by the time he's in the third grade, he has a much greater potential of winding up in a prison. Do you agree with that? What do you think the home life plays in a lot of these people who are being arrested, especially the non-violent ones?
I am certain there is some truth to everything that you said in that statement. I don't know precisely everything that is happening in the home life. I know one of my goals, and one of the goals for everybody sitting up here at this table that is tied to the Department of Corrections is family reunification, is breaking sort of those generational issues that continue to lead to incarceration and the events that lead folks back into our custody. I wish I'd brought my my researcher because she could probably answer that much more articulately than I am able to. But sure, Mr. Senator Stubblefield, I absolutely think that home life and things that happen in your environment and access to services and all sorts of things probably play a significant role in the trajectory of our youth and young adults and everything else.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, of course.
Yes, I think, Mr. Watson, when did you get appointed to the board? What year?
In 2020.
2020? Okay, and then Mr. Magnus, I think he is probably the only one here that predates me. One thing I do with this handout is somebody that's been around a while. You know, this problem has been created by governors and previous legislators not budgeting enough money for corrections. That's just it. You guys have taken a lot of heat that you should have never happened. You know, and I've been through this. If you look back to 2011, when Governor Beebe got in financial trouble, he comes up with the Public Protection Act, which actually was going to reduce crime recidivism. Never happened. And everybody almost voted. A few of us said, no, this is not going to happen. It just kept leading people out. You can see in your handout, the legislators, that violent crime immediately starts going back up. It wasn't the corrections people's fault. Okay? It's everything that you do takes money. And if you have a significant crisis, which we have high crime, high overcrowding, and high incarceration rate, we've got a triple-headed monster. It's going to take a big amount of money to beat. You can see after that bill, through these next things, prison population going over through the years, and I was down there. Then you have Jeremy Hutchison come in 2015. You know, so many of these legislators get out there and beat it. You can see the 2015 bill was going to reduce crime, reduce recidivism. It got worse because there was no significant amount of money. It's just all show. You can see FBI statistics show that we're one of the worst in the nation in violent crime. You can look at our budgeting history of where Medicaid goes. If you go to the big figure, and I'm getting to my question, when I came in 2006, if you look at every percentage we get, public safety got 1.9% of the budget, state police. Education got 44.9. Corrections got 8% of the budget. That's it, 8 cents of every dollar went to corrections. Medicaid got 24%, higher ed got 16%, and county turnback dollars, which is one of the biggest detriments that's happened in our county turnback, giving our judges and mayors more money to work with in turnback, was 4.9%. Fast forward through all these years, the last budget that went through in 2023, state police, Department of Public Safety got 1.8%. Now they may have got an increase because of the amount of money went up, but as a percentage, a lot of top-tucking legislators actually gave less money as a percentage of the budget, which was actually a cut. But corrections stayed 8% of the budget. All the way through, corrections has been 8% of the budget. If you go back to the big thing, as I've advocated back even years ago, thank God we have video in the Senate now, had corrections, and Senator Hester is not here and continues to be beat up on you guys wrongly. If we would have increased corrections to 10% of the budget, which I have always advocated since Senator Hester came in, corrections would have received almost $1.5 billion more dollars. If we'd have moved it up from 8% to 10%, they would have received almost $1.5 billion. If you would have had $1.5 billion more dollars, we wouldn't be talking about here in this situation. And that's why when you're looking at the future years, if we don't increase the budget back to 10% of the budget in corrections, we're never going to get out of this any more than you're going to get to Little Rock by driving to Kansas City. If it's not a significant part of the budget that keeps getting corrected, we're never going to get out of this. So I guess my question to you is, in looking at the future years, you're still going to be operating off 8% of the budget this time. You're actually underfunded by millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, this whole thing with McKinsey, which we have these consultants give these horrible results, the only thing they're good at is hiring lobbyists and then hiring legislators later. But, you know, we have this thing of the increase in pay, which I'm for, but yet, how are you going to absorb that in the budget? Chairman Magnus and the directors here, how are you gonna pay for that in the budget in the increase in salaries? Have we been overpaying you?
No, sir.
No. Our staff has surely not been overpaid at all. In fact, now that we have the increase, you know, we were unfortunately, and I can give you, you know, y'all all have the time. I've been on the board for 26 years. Y'all don't have the time for me to tell you about the needs or what it takes for, Dexter could do what it takes for staff to run a prison. And, you know, if you have a problem in a barracks, we were operating, a year ago, prisons was 60% short of staff. 60%. And what that means sometimes and Dexter's more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I probably would say that we had sometimes one staff member for 200 inmates. Would that be a true statement?
Yes, sir,
Payne?
that's correct.
That's dangerous, because if they have a problem, they have to go to that problem. That leaves 200 inmates by nobody watching them.
And the question I want to be, and I'll email it to you, it's a little more detailed question about where are you going to come up with the budget to absorb how many ever millions it's going to cost the extra, because then you're either going to be taking it from somewhere else, or conceivably, we've been giving you too much money, which I know that's not the case, or we're going to be eventually robbing these one-time funds, which is fiscally responsible along with the performance fund to pay for ongoing operations. Now, on the prison part, and I'll turn it over to some other question, my biggest thing is, as we've talked about, and I came to the board, 2/3 of the inmates come from 8 counties. 4 counties, Pulaski, Benton, Washington, Sebastian, are contributing half the inmates. You know, if you're looking, and no one does anymore, because I said the budget, if we increase the budget 1% to corrections or even 2%, we wouldn't even be here today. The thing about looking at 5 years down the road, 50 years down the road, when you're looking at a facility, and I know this is mostly Joe Porfiry, unfortunately, has driven this point to this, and now everybody's having to deal with it. But if you look at it, it's just common sense. It's just so unbelievably common sense to look at if you're building a facility for 1,000 people, 300 employees, or 3,800, that you would look for a location where you already know you already concretely have a water source, that you're not even going to have to hook onto another water source. Because if you look at the 50-year outlay of having to pay a water bill and a sewer bill for 50 years, versus if you have some type of spring or some type of underground water source that you're getting. It's like so astronomical of that. You look at the road structure that's going to happen. 96, you go in there, I drove it the other day. There's grass growing up in the roads. We're going to have to spend, so looking at this site location, I have never been an envy in this thing. It's a site location. There's no sense spending $150 million or $200 million. Fort Smith said $250 million, and take so many years to have to revamp their system. So my thing is in this whole situation is, this whole thing has just never got off the ground, never made sense in the first place, never can add up. I can't even get veneer that we're paying this California company to do stuff. They won't even return phone calls or ask. They'll take our people's tax dollars, but they refuse to meet with me in Stubblefield. Why are we continuing to not look at the 50-year cost of what it's going to cost if you have to hook onto another water system? Now, if you drill down and get a big spring, yeah, okay, that's going to save taxpayer money. But why have we not got an actual detailed cost of looking at 50 years of what water bills are going to cost us? Bentonville raised their water rates, Eureka's doubling their water rates. You start looking at this, it is so common sense to look at a location that you can hit a spring without a doubt where you can purchase property. Why have we not done any of that? I know Porfiry is, but what is the confusion between Porfiry driving this and you guys, I guess, in the whole thing? And why are we not looking at the 50-year cost with everything?
Okay, what was your last?
Well, why are we not looking at the 50-year cost of the water situation, the road situation? I mean, if you could find this location with its own water source, And Johnny Morris, Bass Pro bought Dog Patch up there. He's trying to get vote with the local water association. He's smart enough to know not to buy a location that he was gonna have to go 30 miles to pipe into a community water system and pay a bill. So why was this, and why are we not looking at what is the cost of 50 years out of the price? I don't want to figure, because Porphyry's not going to answer, Veneer's not going to answer. What is the cost estimated to taxpayers that it's going to cost if you have to hook onto a water system of paying a water and sewer bill for 50 years? And what is the relationship between the board and Porphyry and this whole situation? How much is Porphyry driving this? How much is the board driving this? I just want to be clear.
I don't know how to answer that. The board has a constitutional duty to run, to manage and operate the prisons. We've been requesting more beds for several years, and this is one of the few opportunities we've had to be able to consider a new facility. And so that's all I know how to answer that question. I do want to go back to, I did get my numbers that y'all had asked about violent and nonviolent. It's 40, in 24, it was 49.3 points percent violent versus nonviolent. So there was, 51% nonviolent, 49%. And you can look at the numbers, it changes every year. I got the one year it was 51% violent, next year 50. It changes every year, but I have be glad to send this to the chair, and y'all can share it. But I wanted to answer that question. There's one other thing I want to bring up, since Ms. Brown, Representative Brown brought up the centers, the reentry centers. We've closed centers because they weren't treating the inmates correctly. They were taking advantage of the inmates and their work. In other words, they were taking them out into public work and getting money for it and then not paying the inmates. Okay? That's one instance. We've also had to close some down because they weren't, their food was outdated that they were serving the clients that were there. But with that said, the centers, the reentry centers are important, but it's also, it's a budget constraint as well as an inmate constraint. As I think you left before the complete testimony was done the other day, and it was never said all the time during the testimony, reentry people have to be approved by the parole board. We can send them 10 names and they may only okay 5. So that's, and I don't think it should change, because I'm not trying to say that's a bottleneck that shouldn't be, but that was not told by Mr. Bell. It didn't come out in the testimony till late in the day. But there's another factor that when Senator King talks about funding, if anybody knows about drug courts that we have throughout the state, they are effective. They do a good job. There's nothing magical about it. It's just that we limit how many, instead of a probation officer having 100 clients, that drug court officer may only have 15. So he stays on top of them more. He goes visit more. It's all about supervision. We don't have the money. We don't have the staff or the funding to, say, double probation officers. Probation for a lot of people does work, but you have to monitor them. You have to supervise them, and so it's. I know y'all probably don't want to hear that from somebody like me, always asking, because we always seem to ask for more money. But we do have a need, and to for more funding for certain spots, like reentry beds, like more probation officers. But again, when they fail, you have to have a place to put them. You have to.
Mr. Chair, okay, so you're not answering my question. You're going to get emails from me about what is the relationship, Ms. Wallace, Ms. Veneer. They won't answer questions. They won't even do anything, okay? And Mr. Porfirio, because Chairman Magnus is 1,000% correct. And what I've said for years is that the legislature and previous governors, and even today, you're getting underfunded because everything you do takes money. But I'm trying to look at and what is the best situation for the taxpayers long term. The best situation ultimately for at least water is to find your own water source. That didn't even happen in the purchase of this property. This is going to be $1 billion+. You add up over 50 years what the extra cost of paying a water and sewer bill is going to be. It's going to be astronomical if the right thing had been done is to find a water source that wouldn't have cost the taxpayers right off the bat. I mean, I worked in the construction business, in the poultry business, but if the legislatures keep underfunding corrections, we will never get out of this. But so there's no answer on Veneer and Mr. Porfiry and the relationships. Mr. Wallace, do you have anything to say about Veneer, Porfiry, and their involvement in this?
So I will say that I think in response to the water source, the process as I understand it, I wasn't around whenever we procured land and did all of the things with the last.
You were not involved in the procurement of the land, the purchase, or any of that part till it happened, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So you were kept in the dark like everybody else until Mr. Porfiry basically seems to be the one pulled the trigger.
Well, I don't know what the process was for the selection and all of the things that led up to that. But what I do understand to be factual is that everything that we could do before we purchased the land was done in terms of checking things out. For us, in determining where the water source goes, I don't know the answer at this point. I think all options are on the table. I think we are limited in how much we can do because we do not yet have our architect and engineering contract in place. So in terms of planning things out and moving forward on what a plan and what it would cost to put water in place for this specific facility or anywhere else that we were going to build a prison. A crucial step with that is securing the contract for the architect and engineer, and we have not yet moved forward with that. And I think that we are doing as much as we can right now. So we know we have some different options. Mr. Magnus, I think, talked about some of those earlier, but
those things should have been done in the front line. This facility we're in, any business, whether we're building chicken houses or construction that's going to kind of conceivably feed 3,800 people, that should have been figured out way before the purchase of the land. And that wasn't your thing, but that's where it goes. But you're still not, and I'm going to email you because we need to move on.
Yes,
but the other thing is too, I want to talk about DEI, woke, all this.
Sure.
If you look at Veneer, they're DEI and woke. And they're turning over $1 billion+ project to them. You look at the other companies involved. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on about being against woke and DEI and a professor, or even putting things on our county that happened this last time. So I guess the question is, once again, it's still not answered. Where is this communication with Porfiry and Veneer? It's not answered. A simple question is to figure out what is going to be the 10-year cost to pay a water and sewer bill for what you're conceivably doing. So I'll just email you the question.
okay.
Senator King, if I might add a little bit, and this kind of backs up what you've been saying. And I know from watching criminal justice in Arkansas since the early '80s, we all probably remember, if you weren't there, you probably remember hearing about Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, Tommy Robinson chained people up on the fence. Yeah.
The county jail backup goes back to 1981.
Yeah.
And facilities have been added, beds have been added, but the department hasn't kept up. I mean, the funding hasn't been there.
No, the legislature and previous governors have not kept up with the funding to correct you.
I'm not trying to point my finger at
Well, I
any
get to
current
point
legislature.
fingers, and I'm good at that. So,
Senator King,
But-
let Mr. Watson.
so go ahead.
But this has been around for 45+
Sure.
years. And, you know, we make progress, and then as our population grows, and as, I think some of our prosecutors are more aggressive than others, and I'm from Sebastian County, I think percentage-wise, we probably send more people to Department of Corrections per capita than other counties. But I do want to throw in that as I got onto the board and got to learn more and more about what all's involved, the budget, the amount of resources we have and we utilize to try to, as we bring people in, turn them out so that they don't come back to prison. We're not as successful as we'd like to be. An interesting fact that gets overlooked, and the last statistic I saw was a few years ago, but Arkansas spends less per bed than any other prison in the United States.
And you guys are one of the most efficiently run for the amount of money and what you do. You are one of the top places in Arkansas. And that's why I don't like you guys that have been beat up on about legislators that you've got, if all these other agencies manage money like you guys did, it would be a lot state government situation.
Well, we don't have much choice. And
yeah.
Senator Stubblefield, to your point earlier, the Board of Corrections and the department, we don't control who comes to us. We're sitting in the middle of the system. You have the prosecutors and the criminal justice system that sentences people, but we don't control who comes to us, which inmates come to us. We have them for the period of time that we have them. They either serve their sentence and they leave, or they're paroled. And a lot of them are paroled or let out a little bit early, depending on good behavior and how they were sentenced. The board itself and the department doesn't really control that. The parole board is independent and they control that. So we're kind of the monkey in the middle, if you will. And whatever budget we're given, we have to make do regardless of how many inmates come in.
And that's what I say, the budget, if we'd have been 10% of the budget, you guys would have got almost $1.5 billion more dollars. And I know some legislators don't like hearing that, but that's the reality. They've not been funded. But the other part is, Pulaski County is 13% of the population. They're contributing, I think, 21% of the inmates. If you look at the top 4 counties, they're contributing half the inmates where the population is. 4 counties contribute half our inmates. If we don't do things that's outside of your purview to control the crime in front of you, Fox News the other night, there was a retired police captain in New York with the last incident said, you have to get more positive police presence. You can't do that with underfunding state police. As I said, and state police as a percentage was 1.9%. When I came in, it's 1.8%. You know, so it's just going to take a huge amount of money, and that didn't happen this session.
All right, Senator.
But anyway, I know
Ms. Ware, I'm going to let you speak. I know you're here to testify. You've been waiting patiently, but I want you to understand something. I've been here 16 years, and I sit on the Judiciary Committee, City, County, local. I've chaired that for many years. There's none of us in this room that does not believe we need more prison space. I think every legislator here and every person in Arkansas, even those in the Charleston area, believe that we need more. But the way this whole thing was dropped on us when no one was notified, not even the representatives from that area were notified until the day after the land was purchased, that is not the way our government works. We are, you know, I've always looked at legislators as being like deacons. We're the servants. We work for the people. How can we do that if we're not even notified ahead of time about $1 billion project? This is totally wrong, the way this whole thing was kept in secret for so long and out of the public eye, especially those residents. I have sat there for years to peer and review and watch hundreds of millions of Arkansas taxpayers' dollars being wasted. I've watched one $90 million contract that went to DHS for software from California. None of it would work. Nobody made any effort to get that money back. We lost $90 million. And then I've watched dozens of contracts come through that were paying $50 million, $100 million to a company who had been doing this service for 10 years. have no complaints. They've been doing a good job. But all of a sudden, someone recommends somebody for 200 million to do the exact same thing, and that gets approved. It's just a roundabout, and I don't know how to solve it, but I do know that I will not sit by as a senator from that area and watch companies like Veneer take Arkansas taxpayer money and fly first class and take up suites in the residence when they come here and charge alcohol to the state of Arkansas. I will not sit by and let that happen. So, if you could explain to us how the people, why they weren't given a period of public input. I mean, we've always had public input. Anytime there's a project that takes place, a big project in the state of Arkansas, the legislative council always gives those people in that area an opportunity to put their advice, give their advice, put some input, how it's going to affect their life. Because what you did, what you're going to do here is not going to affect most of you. It's going to affect the lives of the people that's lived on that mountain for 150 years. It's not going to affect you, and you're never going to find staffing. Listen, I've went into staffing. You're never going to find in the staff at prison. Are we still at 60% females, Dexter?
No, sir. No, sir. That number is closer to 50%.
So we're 50% female guards, 50% male.
Yes, sir. It's
So you
approximate
got
number.
Female guards taking care of men in prison.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Ware, you have the mic.
I appreciate that. Thank you. My name is Wendy Ware. I'm a Senior Vice President of CGL Justice Services Division, and I am the Director of the Research, Analysis, and Forecasting Unit. Prior to joining CGL about a year ago, I was the President of JFA Associates, who has provided forecasting, research, analysis to the Department of Corrections for the past 30 years. So I have been involved, I'm sure we've met before, as I have appeared before your committee many times. And what I've come here today to do and have been asked to do, so when we do the forecast, we do it every year. We look at emerging trends, usually over the last 2 to 3 years. So we sort of track what's happening in terms of sentencing, time served, what kind of offenders are coming to prison, and we use that to build a simulation model that produces a forecast of how many beds are needed. What I've been asked to do today is really not just focus on the last 3 to 5 years, but use some of our work over the last 15, 20 years and put it together for you all in a long-term trend and really show how we got to where we are. So you'll see that we've put in some of the legislative changes as they've occurred, going back to 2010, 2005, so you can see how those affected the prison population. I want to make a couple of disclaimers. So when we analyze, well, first of all, a little bit more about me. I have spent the past 30 years doing exclusive criminal justice and corrections research in my entire career. I have done over 500 forecasts for all 50 states and over 300 jail institutions. So I've done a lot of forecasts. I am always up on trends in the rest of the country, in states and locals. So I'm going to try to put a little context into where Arkansas is with the rest of the country. A couple of disclaimers. Oh, let's see if I can move down. Nope. Okay, yeah. I know this is hard to read, but everyone at the table here has been provided the slides. 2 disclaimers I want to make before I go into some of the numbers about how we do our work. First of all, I know there's a lot of issues and talk about the difference between Department of Corrections inmates in county jail versus prisons. When we do our forecast, we look at what's called the total jurisdictional population. So it's regardless of where they're housed. It is meant to analyze the total need to house these inmates. So we don't look at where they're housed, we just look at the fact that they are under the responsibility of the Department of Corrections. And the second disclaimer that I like to give when I talk about trends and when we talk about how we do our forecast is that I do not know what the capacity is of the Department of Corrections, and I never know, because I don't want it to influence what we're putting out as a product, which is what you need. Okay? If nothing else changes, if you stay on your trajectory, this is what you're going to need. Okay? Those disclaimers out of the way, I'm going to go through basically how the prison population is determined in terms of the factors that influence it. The first one is admissions into the Department of Corrections. So what's on this chart here and what you have in front of you, in the bars, blue is male, blue is female, red is male. This is the total intake into the Department of Corrections every year since 2010. And we've added these lines here to really illustrate big legislative changes as they've occurred. As you see, between 2010 and 2011, we had Act 570, and that did bring admissions to prison down. In 2013, there was an incident, and what followed was a parole violator zero tolerance policy. So you see admissions up, tick up, tick up, tick up, through 2019 when we had COVID. COVID did bring the number of inmates coming into prison down, delays in court processing, and a need to just lower the population for safety standards. But since then, you see admissions to prison are inking back up to where they were. Okay, this is pretty standard. The COVID influence is pretty standard with what's been happening in the rest of the country. But I want to point out, again, we're focusing on long-term trends. So I'm not just chasing what happened last year, what happens this year. If we go back to 2010, the total number of admissions to prison has grown by an average of 2.4% per year. So that is every year, we average it out, about 2.5% per year. More individuals are coming into prison. That is a combination of new court commitments straight from court, probation violators from court, and parole violators with new charges. Okay. So how does that translate into the prison population? Who is there today? Who is there every day that we've sort of marked in those years? You can see we've put those policy lines on as well, and they pretty much match what we saw with admissions. We saw a decrease in the population post Act 570. We saw a pretty substantial one-year jump with the zero tolerance for parole violators. And then since COVID, I mean, there was a small decrease in 2020 with COVID. I will say that this is smaller than what we saw in some other states around the country. We saw some really big decreases in some jurisdictions. But since then, you have been growing. Since COVID, if we go from 2021 on, you are growing an average of 5% per year. Okay? Surprisingly, that does not put you at the top of the United States. You are currently 17th in prison population growth in the last 2 years. Some of the highest states are Colorado, Mississippi, Montana, Tennessee, and Minnesota, each growing between 10 and 8% per year. Okay? Just putting this a different way. So this is, again, that jurisdictional prison population, and this is the growth year in year. So you can see big decreases post Act 570, a big jump of almost 18% with that parole violator policy, a big decrease in COVID, but you're in the plus side. You're always on the plus side. If we average all of this out, the prison population since 2010 has grown an average of just under 2% per year. Okay? So I'm going to talk about the projection, and I'm also going to, we've put those policy lines on as well. We've taken this all the way back to 2005. So we get basically a 30-year picture of where the population has been and where it's going to go. The bars on the chart represent the end-of-year jurisdictional population, so that's the actual count. The line chart reflects our forecast for those years stacked up, and then from 2025 on is the future projected forecast. The slides following this, I'm going to go into what has driven these ups and downs and what is going to continue to drive the future growth. But really, you know, the forecast has done fairly well in terms of projecting what happens in the population. Obviously, COVID, we over forecasted that year. There's definitely, it's not perfect, but it matches fairly closely with what's happening. Really, the kind of key takeaway here, if we look at the historical growth from 2005 to 2024, it's, you know, right at that 2.1%. The projected growth is 2%. Okay, so it's really, you know, and this is what I wanted to stress today, that you know, there's a lot of talk about different governors and different policies. This is sort of your long 30-year trend, okay, and it's pretty consistent. Okay, I'm going to, you know, it is important to note where you're going, and by 2035, the number's not up there, but you're just shy of 26,000. There are two lines there. One is with the Protect Arkansas Act and one without it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that act as we go through it and some potential changes with that. Okay, so why is the population continuing to increase? One of the things, so it's not just intake, it's how long they're going to serve once they come in, okay? Admissions times length of stay is always going to equal your population. And when you talk about what's driving the prison population, it's one of those two things. It's either how many are coming in multiplied by how long they're going to serve. And so what we've tried to do here is really demonstrate the growth in the total sentence to serve for inmates who are coming in the front door. These are broken down by seriousness levels that coincide with the sentencing guidelines. These are how inmates are sentenced in the state of Arkansas. I also want to note seriousness levels 1 and 2 are lowest, seriousness level 10 is highest. I want to note that in that average sentence in months column, that is their total sentence to serve. And I think it's important to note that the overwhelming majority of offenders in the Department of Corrections have more than one sentence they are serving, okay? So this is the maximum concurrent running sentence. I think the last time we checked a few years ago, it's an average of 2.5 for everyone in the Department of Corrections. So they're not just in for one theft, one felony, they can have underlying charges, okay? The underlying sentences to serve, okay? But this is their total sentence combined with their most serious seriousness level. Now, as you see, we have 2019 and 2023 there, and what's really important here is that every single seriousness level total average sentence has gone up in the past 4 years, okay? So the amount of time to be served in the Department of Corrections is going up consistently, okay? We've just thrown a percent there, ranging from 1%, sort of your smallest group, in level 7, 6% increase in level 8, going from serving 161 months to 191, okay? So it's more time on the back end, and when you reach 240 months, that's 20 years, okay? I want to talk about the other side of admissions, which are parole violators returned with a new charge. I did this presentation on Monday, and there was a question about parole violator technicals, and where are those in these numbers? They are in the blue bars, which represent parole violators, but it's a very small portion of parole violators coming back. Virtually all of the parole violators coming back to the Department of Corrections also have a new charge. Okay? You can see that the percentage of parole violators coming back in that admission stream really shot up in 2013 with the zero tolerance policy, and you're hovering at about 50% of commitments are parole violators with the new charge. I point this out because with those longer sentences, when they are released to supervision, they have that time hanging over them on supervision. So when they go out and commit another charge, they get additional time on that charge. Okay, so we're sort of furthering the more time in prison. Okay, this is a fairly high percentage of parole violators. In other jurisdictions, we really see it around 30–35%. Some of that is a factor of long terms that they have to serve on parole because they have those longer sentences. So it's almost a never-ending cycle. Okay, the other types of intake and increased sentences that I want to highlight are 70%ers. So prior to the Protect Arkansas Act, there was a similar list of crimes that were required to serve 70% of their sentence. So we've gone back almost 10 years with this, and you see that the number of individuals committed with a 70% offense has only grown small, just a little bit, 314 to 330. The average time those offenders have to serve has gone up, as you see. And then this end-of-year population for those 70%ers is really what's driving the prison population. If you look, in 2014, there was only about 3,000. Now there's just under 4,100. In 2014, 70%ers serving, like today, in prisons was 17%. In 2023, it's 22%. So there's a stacking effect going on with these longer sentences, that they're going to continually take up more and more proportion of the prison population and cause it to grow. The Protect Arkansas Act, so we haven't seen anyone come to prison with these charges yet because it's new. They have to go through the legal system. We did do, as part of our work, we do provide legislative impact assessments for the department. We estimated that between 1,500 and 2,000 additional beds would be needed through 2040. So even further than that 2035 because they're going to stack up. They're already serving 7 to 10 years. To serve even longer, it's going to take longer. I do want to, this is one of the things, so we do this work every year. As I said, we track the trends, we look at our estimated impacts and revise them. Other states that have passed this sort of legislation, the impact and how it's going to fall out is highly dependent on the sentences that are then imposed by the judges for those crimes. We also, in jurisdictions and states that have done this, we see changes to plea agreements where offenders are more willing to plead to a charge that is not an 85% or 100% charge. So that is, and future crime and clearance rates are in that. So it's part of our work. It's an estimate at this point that we've built in, as I showed you with those two lines, but we're going to keep looking at it and we're going to keep tracking it. That is one of the things that when we do forecasts and we do try to inform about future needs is when a piece of legislation is going to affect the prison population, it needs to be evaluated as to how it's implemented and how it plays out. Okay. Two more slides. I want to talk about the release mechanism. So at this point, we've talked about how they come in, are they a violator or not, what is their imposed sentence to serve, and now I'm going to talk about the release mechanism. So prior to 2023, there was something called EPA release that released inmates between 90 days and 1 year earlier than their transfer eligibility date. Their transfer eligibility date is what is stipulated in the sentencing guidelines to their earliest possible release, okay? Not the 70%ers, just the average inmate, not under any other legislation. In March of 2023, the governor of Arkansas eliminated EPA releases so that you see that in prior years, between 2,000 and 2,500, inmates were released early, some as early as a day, again, some at that 90-day mark. It was a range, but now that is 0. So you do have about 2,000 people serving. It's an average of about 3 months longer than they did. Okay? That has contributed to your growth the last 2 years. Aside from EPA, and aside, there's the transfer eligibility date that I mentioned, which is the earliest time an inmate can be released. So we take a look at inmates released, how they're released, and at what time frame. And so we come up with a percentage of how many are released on time or held over. Prior to, if you see 2023, that blue bar is quite large, and 83% of released inmates at this point are staying beyond that transfer eligibility date, and they're staying an extra 10 months. Okay? So, and as you see, it's been creeping up. The number of time over has crept up from about 7 months to 10 months from where we are for the last 13 years. And then again, that percentage. So that's a factor of the parole board, releasing them on time and then holding them before they're eventually released. Okay, I'm going to stop and take questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Representative Gonzalez has a question.
How many of those staying past their TE date are staying in county jails past the TE date?
I don't have that information. As I said, we're just sort of total jurisdictional, so I don't know how many are in county jail.